Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on the Wine Access Experience on Facebook. It's so great to see everyone tonight. And I'm just thrilled to have Jaime Araujo here with us of Accendo Cellars. I have two delicious bottles open in front of me that I can't wait to chat more about. And of course, anyone at home, if you are watching and have a question for Jaime, we would love to address as many questions as we can in the next 30 minutes or so. So if you type them in, I will be sure to ask as many as we can get to. But it's great to see everyone. It's wonderful that wine is still connecting us, even in virtual fashions, but it still gives us the opportunity to to connect, to learn more about each other, and hey, drink some wine on Monday at 5 p.m. I'm not going to say this is my first wine of the day, but it's definitely going to be my best.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again so much for being here. So I think we've had a couple minutes for those of you at home to join. So we'll get started. But once again, thanks everyone for being here. Hi, Bob. Nice to see you again. Thanks for being here on the Wine Access Experience on Facebook. And Jaime, so it's such a thrill to have you here tonight. I have so many things to ask you. So first off, I'm just curious. So you've said that Accendo is inspired by the revolutionary Napa wines of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So I'm curious then, how were the wines from those decades different than the wines you find in Napa Valley today? And what are you doing at Accendo to show that inspiration of the past?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Vanessa. It is an absolute pleasure. It's always great to see you. And I've been loving all of these wine access films while we're sitting here in quarantine, hardly twiddling our thumbs, but still, it's nice to see all of our friends and get a little information while we're at home. Accendo, one of the big inspirations for Accendo was these incredible wines from the 60s, 70s, and sometimes even the 50s in Napa Valley that we had the great good fortune to be able to try. And we thought, this is amazing. These wines are, some of them are over 50 years old, and they are fresh and balanced and elegant, and not at all the kind of big fruit bomb that you sometimes associate with Napa Valley Cabernet. And since our style as a family, the Araujo style, if you will, has always been that more elegant kind of balanced style, it just seemed to us that this was something really interesting to look into. And the more we looked into it, the more we realized that a lot of these wines were, instead of being single vineyard wines, they were actually blends of several kind of Grand Cru vineyards, mostly in Oakville and Rutherford, so the center of the Napa Valley. And they were sort of, picking a little earlier and layering in complexity with different sites rather than using hang time in one specific site. And we just thought that was really interesting, especially since after 30 years in Napa Valley, our family, my parents in particular, had great connections with a ton of these wonderful family family grape growers rather, who own these incredible sites. So we were able to source a number of these little plots of extraordinary grapes that we use to make the blend for Accendo.
And I'm curious because obviously you grew up in what I can only call sort of a kind of iconic vineyard, and with a family just so well regarded around the world for the wines that you produce there. Like, does that come with sort of an extra expectation or pressure with your own wines now?
It's so funny. I mean, I suppose it would if we didn't already put enormous pressure on ourselves. I think it's part of our DNA, for better or for worse. We are constantly looking to see how we can make things better. I mean, there is never a point that my parents ever got to at Araujo, and there's certainly not ever been a point at Accendo where we think, we've got the formula. we're done, right? We follow this script, and Mother Nature makes it completely different every year as well. So you can't have a formula. You constantly have to be striving. We're incredibly lucky that at Accendo, we also have our longtime winemaking team of Françoise Pechon. She's been making our wine since 1993. And Nigel Kinsman, who we've had since 2010. And they are obsessed as we are. So it's a great match. And yeah, I guess we don't think of other people's pressure because we already put enough of it on ourselves.
That reminds me of the family I grew up in too. So they aren't from wine, but yeah, same thing. Yeah. So I'm I'm gonna pour some of the 2018 the Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc, and I'm reading on the back. This is actually one of my the questions I wanted to ask you is, so accendo, it says verb Latin to kindle, illuminate, inflame, arouse. That's very evocative language. I love it. But can you tell me more about how you chose that?
Yeah, to be completely honest, the most difficult part of this entire project was probably finding a name. Making extraordinary wine is very difficult, but it was kids' play compared to finding a name that we really loved and that meant something to us. And when we stumbled across Accendo, it was actually our operations manager who went home with a bunch of dictionaries and came back on Monday and said, I think I have something, starts with an A, ends with an O, and it really speaks to me, and it means to inspire and to enlighten and to, really kindle. And I think all of those things resonated with us because at the same time that this was a brand new project, it was also, I like to say it's a startup with 30 years history. Mm-hmm. But it was inspirational too for us as a family because all of a sudden my brother and I were joining as partners with our parents. So we were kind of hoping, we know it's inspiring for us, and we were hoping it would be inspiring for other people too.
Got it. We have a question from home. I'm gonna ask that in just a second. I mean, but because it kind of is related to one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, which is about Wheeler Farms. So, after you sold the property in Calistoga, your family invested in Wheeler Farms, which is beautiful, ultra modern, state of the art, mixed use facility. So what made you decide to do that, and how did you decide how to design it?
It was actually, I think it's kind of the universe was telling us what to do in a way. So we had decided in 2013 when we sold Araujo to the owners of Chateau Latour, the Artemis Group, that we wanted to create something as a family. And so Accendo was born in 2013. And right around the same time, we happened to stumble across this incredible 10-acre property in the center of Napa Valley with a fully grandfathered permit to build a winery and hospitality space. I mean, it was just completely unheard of. And we really felt like we couldn't pass that up. So we built it, and it is a beautiful place, if I do say so myself. But it was much bigger than we needed for us at Accendo. And so we thought, well, when my parents first arrived in the valley, there were so many people who helped them and showed them the way and gave them a hand. And we thought, wouldn't it be kind of nice if we could use that extra space and invite some people who we think are making some great wines, but who don't necessarily have a home for their brands at the moment. And that's sort of how Wheeler Farms kind of grew up into what it is today, which is a beautiful facility shared through a couple of different wineries, with our hospitality house, our kitchen gardens, the chickens, the bees. I mean, that's all our biodynamic heritage. So we kind of come by that naturally. But it's really fun now to have a space where people can come and visit, because we never had that at Araujo. So it was really, it was a nice new step in the process.
Yeah. And so, since there are, there's more than one winemaker there, there's more than one, there's several vintners. Are you all learning from each other and discussing sort of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. It's like, you could try and put best practice into practice all the time, but when people share space and a lunchroom and office space and a lab and all those things, those exchanges just happen naturally. And we also have an incredible team at Wheeler. We have our amazing cellar master, Cesar Sandoval, who's been with us again since the Araujo days. These people who are just always, I mean, they're so good at what they do. They're so talented, and yet they're totally curious still. They're still learning, still looking for how they can do things better. And I think that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying is one of the things that I find so inspiring and invigorating about the wine business, but Napa Valley in particular, is that I think there's always from a very early time, mentioned this before on other episodes, but Robert Mondavi and sort of this idea that our collective knowledge can only help rather than try to sort of hoard it to ourselves. So I love that you have that under your roof there at Wheeler Farms. So Brian, who's watching at home, is just wondering, in terms of Wheeler Farms, how's everyone faring so far this year?
Well, I mean, it's a challenging year, I'm not going to lie. It's really tricky, but we have an incredible team. We've weathered our very second vintage was 2017 and the fires. And we managed to come through that unscathed. So our team is incredibly resilient. They're really good. We have made some changes. We've made a few, in terms of scheduling people and taking the winery team into two teams so that if something happens to somebody in one team, we're protected, and the other team can take over. But so far, touch wood, everyone is healthy. And in the hospitality space, obviously there are no guests, but our incredible chef, Sarah, has been doing wonderful cooking classes online with some of our Wheeler Farms produce. She's also been adding it to some of her boxes. So she's got some Wheeler Farms produce boxes that she's been doing for the local community. And just today they started an Instagram live where they've been showing little different bits of the property, and kind of just, it's nice to sort of get out of your head and your apartment or your house or whatever, and have a little breath of Napa fresh air. So everybody's doing well. Everyone's working together, and that's the most important thing, I think.
Good. The Sauvignon Blanc is absolutely delicious. I'm definitely going to be enjoying a lot more of this later tonight. So I'm gonna pour a little of the 2016. So I have the 2016 Accendo Cellars Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon in front of me, and we actually have a question from home from Rodrigo, who wants to know: do you recommend aging your wine or cellaring your wine, or do you suggest enjoying them young? And also, he has a 15 and a 16 Cabernet Sauvignon and is debating.
Well, it's a very good question. And I'd say what we are constantly striving for is to create wines, to craft wines that can be enjoyed young if you prefer the taste of young wines, but can age indefinitely if you actually prefer to hold on to your wines and drink them a little older. You certainly will never lose anything by keeping them, but we do know there are some people who just really prefer the taste of young Cabernet. And our winemakers are just extraordinary in the way that they treat tannins. They always make these incredibly silky smooth tannins. So it's not like you're going to have something that's going to be really chalky and all elbows and legs when it's young. You don't have to wait, but it'll reward you if you do. I guess that's the best way to put it. And I'd say the 15 is a little more elegant. Some people find it a little austere. I actually really love it. It's one of my favorite vintages. The 16 is a little more generous, a little juicier. There's a little more Cab Franc in it. And so it also kind of depends on your own palate. If you like those juicier wines, then probably the 16, you'll love it now and you'll love it later. The 15, if you really want something that's a little more elegant, you might enjoy it now, but you may actually prefer to hold on to that for a little while.
So you touched on this earlier, but I have a sort of follow-up question. So you were talking about how there's sort of no formula. You guys are always, striving to be the best that you can. So, like, what's your barometer for knowing where you are in that mission?
I'd say probably it's our blending sessions. So we do 3 big blending sessions a year with the whole team. And that's sort of, marketing and sales, as well as winemaking, as well as the entire family. And we normally have Michel Rolland, who comes over from France as well, to join us, COVID notwithstanding. But what I love about those is that I always used to, when I used to judge wine competitions, it always made me laugh because there's never any discussion on a gold medal wine. Everybody knows it's a gold medal, right? No matter how different the palates are around the table, the gold medal wine is always yes. When you get into silver and bronze, then, like 4 people like it and 2 people don't, and you have to discuss and argue. And I always think that when we're at those blending sessions, when everyone agrees and everyone says, wow, we know we've gotten there. So yeah, I think that's one of our big kind of ticks.
Got it. And so, just going back to sort of your background, with your family coming to Napa, and it was in 1990, is that correct?
40 years.
So tell me about, what do you remember from then, and how has it changed now in terms of, winemaking in Napa Valley?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so many things have changed and so many things have stayed the same. I was actually living abroad for a really long time. I was in UK and France for 24 years. So I would come back in the summertime for vacation, but I never really lived full time in Napa throughout those years. And the crazy thing for me when I did move back was there's so many wineries that I just don't even know. Where did they all come from? When my parents first started, there were maybe 50 or maybe 100, I don't know. And now there's 400 or 500. And it is definitely a much busier valley. But then there are other things that I think are really similar. The feel of Napa Valley, the spirit of Napa Valley. You see it now with everybody, having difficulties or issues, whether it's in the hospitality industry or actually in the wineries. Everyone's reaching out to everyone else. Everyone's saying, how can I help? Not here's what's wrong with me, but what can I do for you? Yeah. And people sometimes don't believe me when I say things they're like, yeah, you guys are all competitors. You guys are all I say, no, yeah, we all want to succeed. We're all ambitious. Of course we are. Yeah. But not at the expense of our neighbor. Right. We're a farming community. We're an agricultural community at the base of everything. Yeah. And I think that sort of humbles you, hopefully, if you're relatively smart, and makes you realize that we're all in this together and we get through it together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that does sort of lead me to a follow-up question, though, because I couldn't agree with you more. And this community, again, it's amazing the way that we come together. But as you mentioned, there are so many more wineries now. So how do you capture or strive to capture the attention of consumers these days in the midst of so many other voices?
It's a great question. I think we've had to become much more sophisticated in the way that we look at our consumers and the way that we, when my parents first started, they could have hidden in a closet and people would have beaten down the door to find them because there were 5 cult wineries and that was it. And everybody desperately wanted to get their hands on this. And there was a real passion for Napa Cab. And a lot of the American consumers anyway weren't terribly sophisticated or interested in Italian wines or Spanish wines or those kinds of things. Today, I think the consumers are so different, and it's up to us to kind of find them where they are and to add, see, how do we add value to your life, right?
Yeah.
And that's been a big shift, but I think it's a healthy one. I think it's actually really, for me anyway, as the token extrovert of the family, it's actually a really wonderful sort of way to meet people and introduce them to the wines and to give a sort of a broader stroke through the market and also to open the wines up to people who might never have imagined drinking them before. And who might never have known about them. So yeah, we normally do a lot of work in the market, showing the wines, tasting the wines, talking to people.
So Catherine, who's watching from home, would like to learn a little bit more about your winemaker.
Well, we have two, and they're both amazing. Françoise Pechon, as I said, has been with us since 1993. She was just voted San Francisco Chronicle Winemaker of the Year, and
I saw that. It's fantastic.
So well deserved. She is amazing. She's actually from Luxembourg originally, and did her enology degree at UC Davis, and then she went over to France and actually interned at Chateaubriand. So when you have that sort of white Grave kind of note in your Accendo Sauvignon Blanc, there's the reason for that. She then came back to Napa and worked at Stag's Leap before coming to work for us at Araujo. And she worked for us at Araujo from 93 until 2013. And then she came over to work with us at Accendo, which is pretty wonderful. And Nigel Kinsman is our other winemaker. He's been with us since 2010. He's actually an Aussie. And he originally he's worked with a number of really fabulous domains in Australia before he came over with his wife to the US. And he was, in fact, working with the Krupp brothers, I think up at Stagecoach, if I'm not mistaken. And Françoise basically took one look at him and went, you need to come here. And so she encouraged us to hire him as an assistant winemaker at Araujo. And then he eventually, they just worked so well together that eventually it just became a very natural binary relationship. So they work together for both of the wines. Françoise tends to take point on the whites and Nigel on the reds, but they sort of make all the big choices and discuss everything together, which is pretty great.
Got it. So another question sort of dating back to Araujo and your history there, your family history. Is there one thing that you can think of or point to that you took with you that's sort of a guiding principle? And is there one thing that, let's say, you do completely differently than what you grew up with?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of guiding principle, I would just say, back in the Araujo days, my dad used to say, I don't want to be 100% better than anyone. I want to be 1% better than 100 different people. And that concept of constantly trying to move every single needle, to look at every single place you can, to really be the best you can in every way. I think that has definitely come with us. And, the biggest difference really, I would say, is the fact that instead of being kind of a silo and a sort of an individual island estate property, we are now working with amazing grape grower families in the valley. And I really love that because we're helping to maintain the fabric of the valley. Like I said, it is an agricultural valley, but if families like ours aren't supporting families like those, then who will, right? And if all the vineyards end up getting bought by large conglomerates, it's a very different place. So I love the idea that we're actually families working with families. And that is something that I think is a wonderful new change for us. and has led to great wine, maybe even better wine, and a kind of a more social atmosphere as well, I guess.
So, sort of on a personal note, I know that before things started changing this year for everyone, I believe you were going to be chairing Auction Napa Valley, which is, of course,
Yes.
an amazing, hugely impactful charity wine auction that benefits so many fantastic beneficiaries in Napa Valley. So, I guess well, first, the compliment, I have a huge admiration for the fact that you took that on. It's, as I said, it's just so hugely important to this valley. But is that sort of that culture of giving back or volunteering? Is that something that you were raised with, or is that something that you took on yourself?
Absolutely. It's absolutely a family tenet. It's something. I mean, I remember, philanthropy and giving back from my very youngest days. My parents not making a big deal out of it, but making it very clear that, like, if you have this much, somebody who has so much less, you can help them. You can do something to make a difference and to give back. And Auction Napa Valley is a very natural offshoot of that for us. It was heartbreaking after all the hard work that not only us, I mean, the Napa Valley vintners and every single vintner who agreed to help us and to work with us. And we had this amazing coalition of people working together. And to have to cancel it was pretty devastating, I won't lie. But the two most important things for me were that, for us as a family, were that the vintners assured everyone that they were going to dip into their rainy day fund and make sure every single charity that is supported by Auction Napa Valley will be made whole to the same amount that they were last year. So none of them will miss out by the fact that this auction isn't happening this year. And they very kindly asked us to come back next year and host.
Oh,
So
that's
we will be,
wonderful.
yeah. So we're very excited to come back better than ever and really kick it out of the park next year.
Oh, that's wonderful news. I'm so glad to hear that. Great. And I will be there for sure. It's one of my favorite days of the whole year. So I'm gonna paraphrase this question just a little bit, but a question from Michelle at home is wondering, if it was difficult to go from your family farming your own property where you had control to sourcing from other vineyards.
Another great question. It definitely is a huge change. And for people who are as control freaks as we are, and we are, I can put my hand up to that.
I'm right there with you. It's okay.
But it's a very different way of working. And it was interesting because we came up against, all the vineyards that we own, and we did buy a couple other vineyards, are farmed organically, biodynamically, like we have been doing, organic since '98, biodynamic since 2000. That's just the way we roll, and it's how we have, we've really seen such a difference in the health and the quality of the vines in the vineyard that it just isn't even a question for us. The question is, what do we do when there's an extraordinary vineyard and they're not organic or biodynamic? And we feel that there's a certain level of quality grape growing under which we will not go. Even if it is the most amazing site in the entire world, if it's not farmed to a certain standard, we can't work with that. And we do work with our grape growers very closely to make sure we know exactly what's going on, and we have input into pretty much every single decision. But I think we also felt like there was an opportunity here to work with some fabulous grape growers who haven't had the same experience that we had at Araujo, and who maybe can be brought along into organic and or biodynamic farming. And maybe we have a role to play in helping that process move along. So I think there's sort of a pedagogical aspect to it that we are really enjoying at the moment. And it's a great challenge, in fact.
Yeah. Well, these wines they're extraordinary. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I have one sort of final question for you, which is just you've mentioned a number of times this sort of constant drive to keep getting better, to keep growing, or to keep challenging yourself, which I love. So then, like, what's next? What's the next challenge that you want for yourself and for Accendo?
Well, I mean, I'd say every single year is a new challenge, for sure. But in terms of new and exciting things that are happening, we have a second wine coming out with the 2018 vintage. So that has been a really exciting and interesting thing to start working on. And we also have a couple of vineyards that we replanted about 5 or 6 years ago that are just coming online now. And those are really looking so exciting and so fabulous. And I think those kinds of things. And my dad, he's so funny. He always has his eye out for that next little amazing bit of vineyard that he's going to be able to snag. So he's definitely, not stopping. His eyes are always open. Let's put it that way.
Got it. Well, I'm very excited to hear about the new wine. I hope that we'll have a chance to taste it and share it with our wine access members. But
yeah, our final blending session is at the end of May. So
okay, all right. Well, I can't wait. Everyone who joined us from home, thank you again so much. I don't think I ever actually introduced myself today, but I'm Vanessa Conlin, head of wine at Wine Access, and we're so grateful that you joined us on the Wine Access experience. It's such a pleasure to keep learning and growing in this fantastic wine industry, and to Jaime, to be able to talk with people like you. So thank you so much for your time and for bringing these beautiful wines to us. So
absolutely,
cheers.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having us. Yay!
All right, and we'll see you. We will raise a glass together on the other side.
With pleasure.
All right. Cheers, Jaime. Thanks again.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.